Hello everyone, this is Tim Wilson with Coastal Carolina Fisherman Online Magazine. Thanks for joining us. We are so privileged today to have a true legend of saltwater fishing. Mark Nichols of D.O.A. Lures has joined us today to talk a little bit about D.O.A. Lures, tell us some of his perspectives on the artificial bait industry, and especially what they've got, had in the works, gone in the works, and tell us a little bit of history about D.O.A. Mark is, he's the guy that started the company. He is the owner currently, and he started the company by designing, I think he tells us his first lure he designs was a shrimp, and he's been going on after that. You see it on all the shelves. It's incredibly popular. I teach, or I have very few seminars when D.O.A. is not brought up and presented at some form in those seminars. So it's really a lure that you want to check out if you haven't done that already. Mark, thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure. Glad to be here.
Yeah, Mark's calling us from Florida today, or speaking to us from Florida. Mark, tell us a little bit about how you and D.O.A. got started in the lure business.
Strictly love of fishing. My dad owned a shrimp boat in Galveston, Texas, in Galveston Bay. I helped pull a shrimp net and run crab traps when I was young, so I had every live bait that ever swam. And at a point in time, I realized that dragging a shrimp net in a estuary system is a really pretty stupid thing to do. And I learned how to do some wood carving, and I started carving baits out of wood and making some top waters and stuff like that. And then just kind of one thing led me to another. I ended up from Houston, which is a great place to be way away from as far as I'm concerned. I moved to Austin. A buddy of mine was a very good freshwater angler, and so I started catching some bass, and then I took those worms down to the coast where my dad had moved to Corpus Christi and started catching redfish and said, this is fun. So I started making plastic stuff and messing around initially with silicone, and it's been quite a journey.
Yeah, I'm sure it has. I mean, I've been in fishing for 20 some odd years, which is in some cases not that long, but I've watched your line just absolutely explode into many varieties, many approaches to both saltwater and freshwater fishing. Tell us from a saltwater standpoint today, what is probably the most popular, maybe the popular 3 lures that you guys have?
Well, there's no doubt that, I'm the one that started the kind of the real shrimp craze. Now I've been flattered like crazy by a bunch of Chinese knockoffs, although don't get me wrong, I got no problem with China. They're nice people. I went there a couple times, but it's American companies that took all the information and gave it to them. So, it's kind of a weird deal these days. I can really take pride. I take pride in designing and inventing things. And these days, where you used to have 10 years of respect for your product, now you get about 10 weeks of respect for your product before somebody's sending one to China. But I still enjoy what I'm doing, and I love what I'm doing, so I'm going to keep doing it anyway. I'm just hard-headed.
Understand. So of your line today, tell us what probably the number one most popular lure that you guys have got. What would that be?
The shrimp is still probably my best-selling bait, but, obviously we sell a lot of our CAL series. CAL stands for Cheap Ass Lures. We offer a better deal than most people do. Put 8 or 10 in a pack. I put 12 in a pack. I try to offer the consumer a good deal. I make my baits in the United States, and so as far as salt plastics, like on the west coast of Florida, probably the most popular salt plastic tarpon bait on the west coast of Florida is our Bait Buster. It has also held world records in snook and a world record in trout as well, so speckled trout. So it's a great bait, and of course all our CAL series. I've recently come out with a bait that all of my good fishing buddies have been yelling at me for about 20 years to make, which is a weedless, walking, rattling top water with a high hookup percentage. So that's something that I'm kind of proud of. That's my latest one I've come out with, and it's really a fun bait. It's very effective, and we have a ball with it. It's become one of our go-tos in fresh and salt water. You know, I can throw it in the thickest grass in the world. I can throw it under docks. I can throw it in weeds, and yet I can still hook fish well with it. It's a cool bait. I'll be fishing it tomorrow in Lake Okeechobee, and I'll be fishing it Friday for speckled trout. So it's kind of like whatever's in front of me.
So it covers a lot of ground, lot of.
It covers. Well, you know, most of the stuff that I design, I'm out on the water and I go, man, I need this, and so I go design it. And the more time I spend on the water, the more you see things that you say, boy, there is a niche for that, and it needs to be there. And so it's kind of a fun deal, and it's also very educational. I've recently come out with a bait we call the snake coil. I shoot it literally in a coil, therefore it always kind of undulates and swims. It's got a tremendous look to it, and I made it thinking largemouth bass. Since then, we've caught obviously tons of cobia with it, and we use part of it with a screw lock, and it's become one of my first go-to sight casting baits. If I'm looking at a red or if I'm looking at a big trout, I can throw that thing and they will not resist it. It's got very little movement, ton of action for very little movement.
Okay, outstanding. Now, let me ask you a question. You talk about your shrimp that's been so popular through the years, and it's kind of your flagship lure. I'm fishing for reds or I'm fishing for trout. Tell me, when I've got you rigged up, tell me what I need to do to make it the most effective. How do I present it? How do I retrieve it?
Boy, how many hours do we have?
Probably not enough.
You know, it's funny, when all the big redfish series, trails came out, I instantly had guys taking, one thing about my bait, we'll sell that shrimp in a 9-pack unrigged. Being from Texas, I came from the land of bait casters. They deport you if you're throwing spinning gear in saltwater in Texas when I was young. And so, you had to have something that's a little heavier to be able to throw it with your bait caster. So a lot of folks just put a jig head in my shrimp. If I specifically am targeting a redfish, I want that bait to get down. And, that's a 90% of the time story. And if I want it to get down, I've got to get enough lead or whatever to get it down. It's also my baits, they have pockets in them. The guys that were fishing the redfish trail were rigging them backwards with either a worm hook or a screw hook in the tail and putting a rattle in the bait where the hook would normally be. So that would give them a completely weedless rattling bait that they could throw in real skinny water and thick grass for tailing redfish and that sort of thing. So, there's a lot of different ways to do it, but if I specifically want redfish, if I'm not sight casting them, I want to have enough weight in it to get it down. And the thing with my shrimp that, a learning curve for a lot of folks is it sinks about 1/3 the speed of, say, even an 1/8-ounce jig head with a small shad on it. So you've got to give it a chance to get to where it's supposed to be.
Okay, well that's interesting news because you always want to know. I've got the greatest bait I can get right now. I want to do my part in being able to present it properly. So that was some good information. Now, what do you see in the future for D.O.A? You mentioned some new stuff that's out. Have you got anything on the drawing board or a concept of something on the drawing board that you're going to roll out in the weeks or months to come?
I'm gonna be coming out with some very small baits. And, it's funny how, like I say, I came out with the snake thinking, largemouth bass, thinking cobia, and, perhaps tarpon. I know tarpon and snorkel will eat eels. But since I started throwing the thing, we've kind of come to realize, and the first time I discovered it was right up there in Charleston. And I was throwing it, and guys have been telling us that all their redfish had marine worms in their bellies. And so that's where I started experimenting with that thing, and it was amazing how our success with it. So we brought it down here, and I thought, well, it works in muddy water, but it probably won't, work in crystal clear water. Since then, I throw in crystal clear water all the time now. And sometimes I only throw, it's a 12-inch long bait, the snake oil. Sometimes I only throw about 9 inches of it. Just easier for the fish to eat, being the reason why. But tomorrow I'll be using it for largemouth bass.
Okay, so you're going everywhere, man. You're doing the saltwater, freshwater, and everything in between.
All over the place. From crystal clear water sight casting to, bottom fishing 30 feet of water for big fish or anywhere in between.
Now, do you ever go internationally? Do you go outside the country and take fishing and trying to look at a different environment than what you do day to day?
I do. I have not in real recent history. I sell a lot of baits in South America. I sell quite a few baits in Australia. I sell a lot of my freshwater stuff is going to, strangely enough, Japan and Europe. And so, they're kind of everywhere, but I get feedback from people everywhere. And, a lot of the species are the same that we're fishing for. Very few are different, but it is very interesting that, about 10 years ago, I got a call from the Christmas Islands, and they wanted to buy my Tough Guy, which is the only bait I literally cast netted a pinfish and froze them and cast a mold off of them. So anatomically, he's right on the shape of a pinfish, which also happens to be the exact shape of a bluegill, which also happens to be the exact shape of a butterfish. And in the Christmas Islands, they use that bait strictly for yellowfin tuna, and they buy 20,000 at a time. And I was like, really? Yellowfin tuna? That's what's really fascinating, is that you come up with something and you design it and you learn how to use it effectively in your world, and then somebody like that gets in touch with you and you're like, you're using them for what? But incredibly effective. They buy twice a year. They buy big piles of them, and now the little islands around them are buying them for the same reason. And it looks just like a butterfish. It's the same silhouette. So a lot of times you may call a bait a certain thing, but if it's got a silhouette of some other bait, the fish, they ain't rocket scientists. They don't go, wait a minute, that's got an extra lateral fin on it or something. They don't think that much. Or at least my fish don't. I try to find stupid fish.
And they're finding a better use for your products. That's a great story there. I didn't realize that. So
yeah, it's never ending. You hear that regularly.
Well, here's another question for you. Having been in the industry as long as you've been in it, what transitions have you seen in the bait industry, especially the artificial plastic baits? What transition have you seen over the years? We probably have some people listening today that maybe haven't been here through those years and have seen how far baits like yours and the D.O.A. product has come. Tell us a little bit about what your perspective is on that.
A lot of, some of the baits that have come out now, some of the baits that are made in China were, if labor is 10 or 12 cents an hour, then you can put a lot of labor on a lure. So some of the baits, it's funny, a guy came up to me at one of the shows recently, and one of our distributor shows, from his side, standing in the aisle, said, hey, you need to buy this shrimp of mine. And I'm like looking at him going, no, sir, I already make shrimp. And he said, but look at this one. He showed me a bait, and it was a shrimp, and it looked so good I wanted to put it in boiling water and eat the sucker. And yet then I pulled out my favorite color, or my two favorite colors, which is clear with holographic glitter and gold with a glow belly. And I said, these don't look like any shrimp I've ever seen in my life, but they will outfish your bait. And he got all insulted, and I said, fish will react to different colors. It doesn't have to look exactly right. As a matter of fact, a lot of times you don't want it to look exactly right. And it's amazing how people will pick up something, or an angler will pick up something that in his eye is pretty. In a fish's eye, it's like, yeah, whatever. And I love glow. And glow, you don't just go around seeing glow everywhere, although bioluminescence is everywhere in the water. And so I make a lot of baits with glow in them. I make a lot of baits with holographic glitter in them, because holographic glitter has every color in the rainbow, and if they're keying on a color, that color is going to be there somewhere. So, it's interesting that, you learn. I don't make 4,000 colors, but by golly, there's times when if I don't have that color, I'm not going to catch fish. And so, I also, of course, you guys are the Carolinas. A buddy of mine just did an article and was quoting me. I said, they're staying up there as it ain't no use if it ain't chartreuse. And root beer chartreuse tail is the best-selling soft plastic color, I would bet, of all manufacturers. And it's simply, all it simply is a dark bait, a root beer, which is dark, and a bright chartreuse tail. So it's, to me, it's simply contrast. If the fish isn't seeing the dark, he's seeing the light. And like I say, I don't really consider it rocket science.
Yeah, as a former tackle salesman years ago for a tackle distributor, I have to agree with you with the chartreuse comment. If it's that's a popular color in the Carolinas and probably will stay that way for many years to come. So you hit that one on the head. So anything else that you see that has transitioned over the past 20 years or so?
Well, we're seeing, the same thing we're seeing everywhere, that all stores are facing these days. It's the whole dynamics of the way everything in the world is being sold, thanks to good old Amazon. I'm concerned about tackle shops getting put out of business, and guys are real tactile guys. They want to put their hands on that rod. I don't want to order a rod online and get it there and go, holy crap, this is not what I wanted, excuse my expression. But, I think there's still a necessity for stores to be out there, and I'm concerned about their security in the future of them being able to stay in business. And so that's a big thing. And, I think that guys, I think Walmart, initially stuck tackle in their store not to make money, but to give the husband something to do while the wife was shopping. And still good to have a few lures around. And I kind of feel for, my business will continue because we'll sell online or however we have to sell. But I do feel kind of bad for a lot of the tackle shops that are really getting beat on really hard these days.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a problem that we're all concerned with. Another question I've got for you is, what's your thoughts, what's your perspective on how it appears, at least it does to me, tell me if I'm wrong, that we seem to be transitioning, moving away from live bait over to artificial baits a little more now?
Depends what neighborhood we're standing in at the time. But, my wife and I went to Houston this year, and we did the Bassmasters. Those folks, I give them, we laugh and say they're Bubba Redneck, but they are better conservationists than 3/4 of the saltwater people I know. Catch and release of bass has been a given for a long, long time, and using artificial spore bass has been a given for a very long period of time. I'm very good friends with many captains. And the bottom line is, if Joe Blow gets on their boat and Joe Blow has no clue of what to do of anything, good chance he's going to put a live bait on there so he can feel something tug. But the evolution of, I think, a lot of the young people, they can use that cast net, but I think more and more people are just kind of fascinated by throwing plastic, and fooling a fish on a piece of plastic. You can do it a million different ways. You can use bait, or you can chum fish up with bait and catch them on plastic. There's so many different ways to play the game. But I might tend to agree that more and more people are using plastic, but there's still always going to be that live bait thing out there that, like I say, for a captain's point of view, he needs to put that customer on fish, and that customer may have never made a cast in their life. So, I kind of assume that, I work with the skill level that I fish with. Myself, I ain't got a live well in my boat, and I haven't fished live bait in forever. But at the same time, I've been in a number of boats where we'll chum fish up, and it's really fun, but for the most part, my favorite thing in the world to do is to be pulling my little Mirage along the bank and looking along, making no noise at all, and seeing an 8-pound trout laying in a hole and make a cast and watch that fish eat. To me, that it don't get no better than being able to make a cast and watch the fish eat your lure. That'll keep me coming back forever. Give me a 20-pound tarpon for one of my favorite fish. One of my favorite finesse fish I love to catch are big trout. And I love wade fishing because I love stalking fish. I like hunting fish. And I can make blind casts all day long and bend the rod and have fun. But when I make that cast at that tarpon or that snook or that trout or that redfish and I watch them go over and pound that lure, I'm a happy boy.
I think we all are in that case. It just happens to infrequently for some of us. Well, Mark, go ahead. I'm sorry.
One other that you had mentioned that you had asked me about simplicity and getting into artificial lures. The deadly combo, a rattling cork with our shrimp under it, is one of the most fun, simple, easy ways to start catching fish on plastic. And I don't care if you're 4 years old or if you're 90. When that float goes down, you're a kid again. Same with me. I mean, I've caught a million fish, but when the float goes down, I go, cool, and I go for the hook set. So that rattling float with like our shrimp under it is and will always be one of the most effective. I call it dumb stupid, but it's just incredibly effective.
You know, Mark, I got to tell you a story about that lure. The first time I ever got it, I was working for a marine towing company, and I was in, I believe, Naples, Florida. I believe in a West Marine, I believe. It was a tackle shop of some sort. They
Sure.
had the lure, and it was your D.O.A. product with that, and I got it. And let me tell you something. My only problem is I just wore it out. I mean, it just.
Sure.
The shrimps rattled. I mean, it ripped all the pieces from the fish head in it, and the cork is just like it's faded and all this. Where I used it so long because it became my go-to lure. And you're exactly right. You will never have any more fun than sitting out there casting that out and making it rattle, and then seeing that cork start popping around. And I have to agree with you. Kind of when you mentioned that, it brought back some great memories of the days when I was fishing a lot, because you are exactly right with that lure. And I have to say that's probably for me your flagship lure, because it was. I remember where I bought it, and I've bought many since then. So yeah, great job on that one.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, listen, we before we go today, we want to thank you so much for your time and your wonderful insight on this. We appreciate what you've done for the fishing industry, because you've certainly brought innovation to it. You certainly made our fishing easier and more simplistic, and above all things, more successful. So we hope you have a great season this year and all seasons ahead of you. And thanks again for your time.
Hey, thank you very much.
Okay, Mark, you did a fantastic job, my friend. I have to tell you, great job. And
all right, thank you.
I'll put this in unfortunately, I'll put it on YouTube, but I will shoot you a text with the YouTube link, and
Okay.
We'll go from there. And if we can help you anytime, you let us know.
Hey, thanks a lot. Keep in touch with me. If you get down this way, give me a call.
I'll do it. You can count on it.